The rain had been falling since early morning, tapping steadily against the restaurant's windows like a quiet reminder that the day would be slow and heavy. Inside the small family restaurant, warm lights glowed above the tables, and the faint smell of soup and baked bread hung in the air. It was the kind of place where people came for comfort rather than excitement, the kind of place where conversations blended softly with the sound of clinking silverware. For most people, it was just another ordinary spot on the corner of a busy street. But for the young waitress moving between the tables, this place meant something more. She had worked here for years, long enough to know the usual customers, their favorite meals, and even their habits. There was the older man who always ordered tea without sugar, the couple who came in every Sunday afternoon, and the group of office workers who stopped by during their lunch break. They all recognized her face, they all appreciated her warm smile, but none of them knew much about her beyond that. She was simply part of the restaurant, quiet, reliable, and always working. Her name was Lena. She was not the type who drew attention. She wore her hair neatly tied back, kept her uniform spotless, and moved with a calm rhythm that made everything she did look effortless. People liked her, though they never really thought deeply about her. She was kind, patient, and always ready to help, but also someone who blended into the background without trying. And Lena preferred it that way. She didn't look for the spotlight. She didn't want people asking too many questions. She was comfortable serving others, offering small smiles, and disappearing gently into her tasks. This evening, however, felt heavier than usual. The restaurant was half full, but the rain made everyone quieter. Conversation sounded tired, almost sleepy. The usual weekend musician had canceled earlier in the afternoon due to a family emergency, leaving the small stage in the corner empty. Without music, the restaurant felt strangely still. Even the old upright piano beside the stage looked lonely, covered in dust that had settled over its wooden surface. Lena noticed it every time she passed by. That piano had been there since the day she first started working. It wasn't meant to be used anymore. It was just decoration now, something the owner kept because it added a bit of charm to the room. No one had touched it in years. Customers hardly remembered it was there, but Lena always noticed. She couldn't help it. Every time her eyes caught the shape of it, she felt a small tug in her chest, something familiar, something she had buried deep inside, but she kept moving. That was what she always did. She carried plates to the kitchen, wiped tables clean, refilled glasses of water, and checked on customers with gentle politeness. The rain outside didn't seem to stop, and people kept coming in damp from the cold air, shaking off their umbrellas and settling into the warmth. "Busy evening," the cook mumbled when Lena passed the counter. She smiled a little. "Rain always brings people in." He nodded, already focused on preparing the next order. Time moved slowly, but the restaurant had its own quiet rhythm. Lena liked this rhythm. It gave her something steady to follow. As she worked, she didn't talk much, but she listened too. The soft conversations, to the distant hiss of the grill, to the sighs of customers who felt relieved to be inside. At one table, a family with 2 children tried to keep them entertained. At another, a woman scrolled through her phone while waiting for her meal. At yet another, a man sat alone, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. Lena checked on each of them, making sure their drinks were full and their food was right. To her, these small tasks were meaningful. She liked knowing that a simple gesture could make someone's day just a little bit easier. But underneath her calm movements, there was a feeling she never said out loud, a feeling that her life had become a pattern she couldn't quite step out of. She worked hard. She was grateful for her job. But sometimes she wondered if there was something more, something she had once dreamed of, something she had pushed aside. For a moment, she paused near the piano again. Her hand brushed lightly against its edge as she walked past. She didn't stop long enough for anyone to notice, but the touch made her heart tighten a little. She quickly pulled her hand back and continued on her way. A group of regular customers had taken their usual table near the back. They were cheerful, joking among themselves even on such a rainy night. One of them waved her over. "Lena, you look tired today," the man said kindly when she reached their table. She laughed softly. "Long shift, that's all." "You always work long shifts," another person added. "Must be tough." She shook her head. "I'm used to it." But their words lingered in her mind as she walked away. She was used to it, maybe too used to it. Her life had become a steady routine: wake up early, go to work, go home late, repeat. She didn't complain, but sometimes it felt like she had left a part of herself behind somewhere, like a piece of her life had been paused for too long. She continued serving customers, quietly observing the small details around her. Outside, the streetlights glowed through the rain, making the wet pavement shine. Inside, the restaurant's hum remained gentle but slightly dull. Without music, it felt incomplete. Some customers even mentioned it. "Feels strange without a guitar tonight," someone said. "Yeah, I miss the music," another replied. The owner shrugged when Lena mentioned it to him. "Can't be helped. Nothing we can do without the musician." But Lena wasn't so sure. Something inside her stirred again, something she didn't want to think about. As she refilled a cup of tea for an elderly woman, the woman smiled at her warmly. "You have such a peaceful presence, dear. It's nice to see young people who are so patient." "Thank you," Lena replied softly. "You remind me of my granddaughter," the woman continued. "She plays piano beautifully. Ever heard of the song Moon River? She plays it all the time. Makes me cry every time I hear it." The name of the song felt like a soft knock on Lena's heart. She swallowed, her voice quieter than before. "Yes, I know it. Lovely song," the woman said. Lena nodded, but her thoughts were already drifting far away. She could almost hear the melody in her mind, gentle and warm. She could almost feel her fingers moving across keys that she hadn't touched in so long. She shook her head slightly, trying to push the thought away. This wasn't the time. This wasn't her place. She was here to work, nothing more. An hour passed, and the rain outside became heavier. Some customers lingered longer than usual, unwilling to step back into the cold. The restaurant felt safe, like a shelter from the storm. Lena moved among them with quiet grace, but her mind kept returning to the piano, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. Near closing time, a small group of friends entered the restaurant laughing loudly. They shook water from their jackets and chose a table near the piano. One of them pointed toward it playfully. "Who even uses that old thing?" he joked. His friend replied, "Probably nobody. Looks like it would fall apart if someone tried." Lena heard their laughter as she brought them menus. She forced a polite smile, but something inside her tightened again. She wanted to defend the piano, but she didn't. She just placed the menus, answered their questions, and stepped away. But when she turned, she caught her reflection in the restaurant's window. She looked calm, just as she always did. But her eyes, they looked tired in a way she hadn't noticed before. She looked like someone carrying a quiet dream she never allowed herself to speak about. The rain softened slightly, but the night remained dark and cool. Customers finished their meals slowly, stretching out their time inside. The soft lights made the room feel warm, but the silence where music should have been felt almost too heavy. Finally, a regular customer approached the counter where Lena was stacking clean cups. "Strange without music tonight," he said. "Yes," she replied. "It feels a little empty." The man chuckled lightly. "Do you play anything? You always look like someone who might have a hidden talent tucked away." His words caught her by surprise. She blinked quickly. "Me? No. I just work here." But her voice lacked confidence. And he noticed. "You sure?" he asked with a friendly smile. "You seem like someone who's good at something artistic." She smiled back, but this time it was smaller, weaker. "I used to play a little, a long time ago." He raised his eyebrows. "Really? Well, if you ever feel like bringing that old piano to life again, I bet people would love it." Lena didn't answer. She just nodded politely and returned to her work. But her heart was beating faster than before. She wanted to shrug off his comment, pretend it meant nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a memory rising up, like something inside her had shifted. She walked past the piano one more time. She didn't dare touch it again, but she paused for a second longer than usual. In the soft glow of the restaurant lights, the piano didn't look as forgotten as it usually did. For a fleeting moment, she imagined sitting there again, placing her fingers on the keys, letting the quiet world around her fade as music filled the room. But her shift wasn't over. People still needed her. So she continued working, trying to steady her thoughts. The night moved on, steady and slow, just like all the nights before. But something inside her had awakened, something she wasn't sure she could ignore anymore. And although she didn't know it yet, this ordinary rainy evening was the beginning of a change she never expected, a change waiting quietly in the shadows of the restaurant, right B. The rain finally began to slow down outside, but the air inside the restaurant still felt heavy, as if the whole day had pressed its weight onto the walls and floors. People spoke in softer voices, tired from the long, cloudy afternoon. The glow of the lights made everything feel warmer, but there was still a strange emptiness in the room, a quiet that didn't belong there. Without the weekend musician, the place felt a little lifeless, like someone had taken away the one thing that kept the evening's lively dot. The old upright piano sat in its usual place near the wall. Most people didn't even glance at it, but tonight it seemed more noticeable, almost like it was waiting for something. A thin layer of dust covered the top, and a small scratch ran across the wooden surface, as if time had left its mark, and no one cared enough to wipe it away. The keys were hidden behind a slightly warped cover, and the bench beside it looked a little wobbly. Still, even in its tired state, the piano carried a quiet kind of dignity, like it remembered days when people gathered around it. Laughing and listening, Lina moved past it again, carrying a tray toward the kitchen. She tried not to look at the piano, but her eyes drifted to it anyway. Something inside her always reacted when she saw it, like a tiny spark lighting and then fading just as quickly. She had learned to ignore that feeling. Life demanded practicality, not daydreams. She had bills to pay, work to finish, and customers to serve. There was no place in her everyday routine for the part of her life that had once belonged to music. Still, the silence in the restaurant made its presence stronger, and she felt it more than ever tonight. Feels empty without the music, doesn't it? The cook said when she entered the kitchen. She nodded quietly. Yes, it does. He didn't know anything about her past with the piano. No one here did. When she applied for the job years ago, she had pushed away everything that reminded her of the world she left behind. She didn't talk about her old hobbies or the competitions she once joined. She didn't mention the piano lessons she took when she was young, or the hours she spent practicing when everyone else was asleep. It felt easier to let those things fade than to explain them. But now, standing there in the kitchen with the faint sound of rain in the background, she wondered if she had forgotten too much of herself. When she stepped back out to the dining room, several customers were gathered near the counter waiting for takeout. A few chatted with each other, but most just looked tired. A woman rubbed her arms to warm herself. A teenager scrolled through his phone. A man checked his watch, tapping his foot quietly. Across the room, a couple near the window was looking at the piano. That thing still works? The man asked, raising an eyebrow. I doubt it, the woman replied. It looks ancient. Lena heard them as she walked by. She didn't say anything, but her chest tightened a little. The piano wasn't just a piece of wood or decoration to her. It was something with meaning, even if no one around her knew why the owner walked in from the back office, stretching his arms. "What's with all the gloomy faces?" he joked, trying to lighten the mood. One of the customers called out, "We miss the music. The place feels too quiet tonight." The owner laughed. "Tell me about it. If anyone here knows how to play, be my guest." He said it lightly, like it was a harmless joke, but to Lena, the words felt heavy. She swallowed deeply and kept her eyes on her tray. A man sitting near the counter heard this and chuckled. Imagine one of the staff suddenly playing. That would be something. Lena forced a smile when he looked at her, but she didn't reply. She went back to refilling water glasses and checking on tables, trying to distract herself. But the idea lingered in the air like a scent. She couldn't escape. The piano, the music she once loved, the part of herself she locked away. Every time she passed the piano, her steps slowed just a little. She found herself glancing at it more often than she wanted to admit. The old instrument seemed like a quiet witness to her inner struggle. Meanwhile, more people came in from the rain. Families, workers getting off their evening shifts, couples looking for something warm to eat. The noise level rose slightly, but the atmosphere still felt incomplete without the soft strumming, or gentle chords that normally filled the evening's. At one table near the middle, a father and his young daughter were eating soup. The girl pointed at the piano and asked, "Why is that there if no one uses it?" Her father smiled. "Maybe someone will play it someday." Lena felt those words stick. In her mind, like glue. Someday. A word that floated around her thoughts. Too often, but never settled into anything real. She sighed softly and went back to preparing drinks at the counter. Her hands moved on their own, out of habit, pouring, stirring, placing cups on trays. Her routine was steady, almost automatic, but her mind was nowhere near her hands. It was stuck on memories she had tried to bury long ago. She remembered sitting in a room with soft light coming through the window, her fingers running through scales as her teacher corrected her posture. She remembered her first small audience, just a group of neighbors, but she had felt nervous and excited all at once. She remembered playing late at night when the world felt quiet, how the keys felt smooth and cool beneath her fingertips, and how the music seemed to flow straight from her heart. She remembered how alive she felt. "Hey, you okay?" one of the regulars asked when she handed him his drink. She blinked, pulled out of her thoughts. "Yes, I'm fine. Just a long day." He smiled kindly. "You always say that. But you know, you look like someone who's thinking about something else tonight." She laughed lightly, though it wasn't fully genuine. "Maybe I'm just tired." "Tired people don't look like they're staring into their own memories," he joked. She didn't respond. She simply thanked him and walked back to the kitchen, hoping no one else noticed her drifting mind. Later in the evening, when the crowd thinned out a little, the restaurant felt quieter again. The owner stood behind the counter, wiping a glass with a towel while chatting with a couple of customers. "Such a shame about the musician canceling," one of them said. "Yeah," the owner replied. "He called last minute. Nothing I can do about it when he has a family matter." "Maybe you should get someone to play the old piano," the customer suggested. The owner laughed. "That thing? I'm not even sure it's still tuned." Lena heard him and felt a mix of relief and disappointment. She didn't know if the piano was tuned either, but she knew she could still make something out of it. Music wasn't something she forgot, not completely. She still tapped her fingers on counters when she thought no one was watching. She still hummed softly while she cleaned. She still dreamed of music, even if she didn't let herself admit it. As she cleaned a nearby table, the friend group that teased the piano earlier started talking again. It's too bad no one here plays. It would be cool to hear something tonight, one said. Another replied. Even a simple song would make the place feel warmer. The third person added with a grin, Hey, maybe the waitress knows a song. She looks like she might. Lena felt heat rise in her face. She kept wiping the table, pretending she didn't hear them. But she felt the same tug in her chest stronger. This time, the restaurant was quiet enough now that she could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft clinking of utensils, and the rain outside slowing to a gentle drizzle. The emptiness around the piano felt louder than everything else. The old instrument sat there quietly, almost calling to her. Her heart began to beat a little faster, though she tried to calm herself. She didn't want to draw attention. She didn't want to embarrass herself. She didn't want to open a part of her life she had closed tightly. But she also didn't want the piano to stay silent. As she walked past it again, she felt herself slow down. Her hand brushed gently over its surface, not intentionally, but as if her body moved before her mind could stop it. The wood felt familiar beneath her fingertips, almost comforting. She pulled her hand away quickly, afraid someone might notice, but a regular customer sitting nearby did notice. You like the piano? He asked casually. She turned to him with a soft, polite smile. It's part of the restaurant. I see it every day. That's not what I asked, he teased. I said, do you like it? Lena hesitated. I used to play when I was younger. The man's face lit up. Really? That's wonderful. She felt shy instantly. It was a long time ago. He leaned forward a little. If you ever feel like playing again, this seems like the perfect night for it. She shook her head. Oh no, I couldn't. Not here. Why not? He asked. Everyone here is friendly, and we could all use a little music on a rainy night. She didn't know what to say. She felt caught between fear and longing. The part of her that missed music whispered gently in her heart, urging her to try. The part of her that feared attention screamed for her to walk away. She managed a small smile. Maybe another time. But as she walked away, something inside her felt unsettled. The piano was no longer just a dusty decoration in the corner. It was a reminder, a symbol, a door she had closed but never locked completely. The restaurant slowly grew quieter as more customers left. The sound of rain softened outside, and the warm lights made the place feel peaceful again. But for Lena, the evening had stirred something deep inside. She gathered plates, cleaned tables, checked on the last few diners, and prepared for closing time, but the piano stayed in her thoughts. No matter how hard she tried to push it away, it felt as though the old inn. The next evening began quietly, almost too quietly. The sky was clearer than the night before, but the air still felt cool from the storm that had passed. The restaurant lights glowed softly through the windows, welcoming people in from the chilly breeze outside. Inside, the tables were neatly set, the floors were freshly cleaned, and the old piano stood exactly where it always had, still silent. Still waiting. Lena arrived early for her shift, as she always did. She liked coming in before the rush began. It gave her time to organize her mind, to breathe a little before the noise of customers filled the space. But today, her thoughts didn't settle easily. They kept drifting back to the conversations from the night before, the soft encouragement, the quiet suggestions, the simple question about the piano. She didn't understand why it bothered her so much. She had gone years without playing. She had managed just fine. She lived simply, worked steadily, and never caused any trouble. But now, it felt like something inside her had been stirred, as if a door she had closed long ago had been pushed open just enough for light to slip through. As she tied on her apron, she glanced toward the piano again. The morning sun peeked through the window beside it, making the dust on the surface shine slightly. She felt a strange mix of longing and fear, a feeling she didn't know how to explain. When the owner entered the dining room, he noticed her stare. "That piano catching your interest today?" He joked lightly. She blinked quickly and shook her head. "Just cleaning," she replied, though she wasn't holding a cloth or doing anything related to cleaning. He chuckled and walked away, not thinking twice about her answer. She let out a slow breath, grateful he didn't ask more. The afternoon passed with slow footsteps. A few customers came in early, ordering late lunches or coffee to warm themselves. The streets outside remained quiet. Lena moved through her tasks with practiced ease, but her mind wandered more than usual. Around early evening, the familiar group of regulars arrived, the same ones who often joked and chatted loudly. They chose their usual table near the middle of the room. As always, they greeted Lena warmly when she approached. "You look more awake today," one of them said with a grin. She smiled politely. "I slept well." "That's good," another replied. "You looked like you were thinking too hard yesterday." The first person chimed in. Maybe she was thinking about that piano. Lena felt her heart jump. She forced a small laugh, trying to hide her discomfort. "It's just part of the restaurant decor," she said lightly. Still, the woman at the table added, "Something about it feels meaningful, you know? Like it's waiting for someone." Lena didn't answer. She simply wrote down their order and walked away, feeling her cheeks grow warm. She wished they hadn't said that. She wished they didn't notice the way she looked at the piano. She wished she didn't feel something every time someone mentioned it. As she set cups on the counter, the owner brought out a stack of menus and sighed. "The musician texted again," he said. "Says he won't be back until next week at least." "That long?" Lena asked quietly. "Yeah, something about a family situation." He waved his hand. "No music again tonight." For a moment, she thought he looked at her differently, almost like he wondered if she might volunteer. But she quickly lowered her gaze, pretending to focus on her task. She didn't want him to ask. She didn't want to answer. Over the next hour, more customers walked in. The restaurant became livelier, though the absence of music was noticeable again. Conversations filled the room, but there was a small emptiness between them. People seemed to feel it too. A couple sitting near the window spoke softly about how much they enjoyed hearing live music on weekends. A man reading a newspaper kept glancing toward the piano with mild curiosity. A young girl walked up to it and pressed her hand against the wood before her mother gently called her back to their table. And then came the moment Lena had been trying to avoid. A familiar older customer, someone who always ordered tea and smiled kindly at everyone, beckoned her over with a gentle wave. "You know," he said as she reached his table, "last night when you mentioned you used to play, it stayed in my mind." She felt her breath catch. "Oh, I didn't mean much by it." He smiled. "But it meant something. You spoke softly, like someone remembering something dear." Lena lowered her eyes to the table. "It was a long time ago." "Time doesn't erase talent," he replied warmly. "Sometimes it only hides it." She didn't know how to respond. His words touched a place she kept guarded. She thanked him for his order and walked away quickly, not wanting him to see the uncertainty in her face. A short while later, a group of 3 friends entered the restaurant, laughing about something that happened earlier in their day. They chose a table near the piano. While looking at the menu, one of them tapped the piano bench with his shoe and joked, "I dare anyone here to play this thing." Another friend laughed. "I bet it makes more squeaks than music now." Lena tried to ignore them as she approached to take their order, but she couldn't help looking at the piano again. It didn't look broken. It didn't look useless. It looked sad, maybe a little tired, but not dead. The friend who tapped the bench noticed her glance and smirked playfully. "Do you know how to play?" She shook her head a little too quickly. Just taking your order, she said in a soft voice. Come on, he said, teasing. Even a simple song would make the night better. Lena offered a polite, careful smile. I'm sure someone else will play someday. But why not today? He replied casually. She didn't answer. She wrote down their order and hurried away. Her heart was pounding now. She didn't know why their questions affected her so much. Maybe it was because they didn't understand the weight of her memories. Maybe it was because she felt the same longing they pointed out. Maybe it was because deep down, she wanted to sit at that piano more than she allowed herself to admit. As the evening went on, the restaurant's gentle noise rose and fell like waves. People laughed, talked, shared meals, and warmed themselves from the cold night outside. But every now and then, someone commented on the missing music. It feels strange without it. Wish we had a little piano tune right now. Even a beginner's song would be nice. Each comment tugged at Lena's chest. Near closing time, fate stepped in again in a way she didn't expect. A regular customer, a woman who came every Thursday evening with her brother, approached the counter. She had a calm, warm presence, and she always took time to chat with the staff. Tonight, she walked up with a smile that seemed to hold a little mischief. Lena, she said gently, I've been meaning to ask you something. Yes? Lena responded, hoping it wasn't about the piano. But it was. My brother and I were talking, the woman said, gesturing toward the man at their table. You have such a peaceful way of moving. You remind us of someone who used to play music in our family. Lena felt her heartbeat quicken again. I used to play. A very long time ago. The woman's smile grew warmer. Would you consider playing something tonight? The question hit her like a soft shock. Me? Yes, the woman said. Just one little song. It could make the whole room warmer. Lena shook her head slightly. I don't think I can. I haven't practiced in years. That's all right, the woman replied. You don't have to be perfect. Just honest. The word honest struck her deeply. Music had always been the most honest part of her life, the part she couldn't fake or hide. She felt her throat tighten. She glanced around. Several customers sat with relaxed expressions, talking quietly. The restaurant was calm tonight, not too busy, not too loud. It felt strangely intimate, as if the room was giving her space to breathe. Then she looked at the piano again. The soft restaurant lights reflected gently off its wooden surface. It didn't look lonely anymore. It looked patient, almost inviting. Still, she felt afraid. Afraid of making a mistake. Afraid of drawing attention. Afraid of opening a part of her heart she had closed for so long. The woman touched her arm lightly. You don't have to say yes, she said. But I think you want to. Lena lowered her gaze. She didn't want to admit it aloud, but the woman was right. She did want to. She wanted to touch the keys again. She wanted to hear the music she thought she had lost. She wanted to feel alive, in a way she hadn't felt in years, but wanting it didn't make it easy. When the woman returned to her table, Lena stood still for a moment. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. Customers continued eating, talking, and enjoying their meals, unaware of the small storm growing quietly inside her. A few minutes later, the owner emerged from the kitchen, carrying a box of supplies. He set it on the counter and stretched his neck. Long night, he said. Lena nodded. Yes. He followed her gaze and noticed she was staring at the piano again. His eyebrows lifted with mild surprise. You really do like that old thing, don't you? She opened her mouth, then hesitated. It reminds me of something. He smiled. Well, if you ever want to test it out, you're welcome to. I don't think it'll fall apart. She almost laughed at that, but nerves held her back. Maybe, one day. He shrugged, not pushing further, and returned to the back. But now the room felt smaller somehow. Everything seemed to point toward one momenter, sitting at that piano, even if only for a minute. Her heart was soft, but also scared. She knew something inside her had changed since the night before. The idea of playing was no longer just a wish buried deep inside her. It was now a quiet need growing louder with each passing hoe. The next day began with a quiet warmth, the kind that came after a long storm. The sky was finally clear, and soft sunlight slipped through the windows of the restaurant, giving everything a gentle glow. The wooden floors looked a little shinier, the tables a little brighter, and even the old piano seemed less forgotten. The rain had washed the world clean, leaving behind a peaceful calm that settled over the morning. Lena arrived early, as she always did. She moved with her usual quiet steps, tying her apron around her waist and checking the tables before anyone else came in. But something inside her felt different. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was more like a soft pulse under her skin, a feeling that something had shifted, even if she couldn't explain it. The night before kept returning to her mind, the way people had gathered around the stage, the way the restaurant had fallen completely silent, the way her hands had trembled slightly on the keys until the music carried her, and most of all, the way the room had felt alive again, filled with warmth and surprise. She had not meant for any of it to happen. She had only wanted to help, only wanted to fill the empty space left by the missing musician. But as much as she tried to tell herself that, she knew there was more. Part of her had missed the piano for years. Part of her had missed playing at all. Still, she didn't want to draw attention. She didn't want people fussing over her or asking her to perform again. She didn't want eyes watching her every move. Her life had been quiet for so long that anything louder felt overwhelming. The morning passed without much happening. A few regular customers came in, greeted her warmly, and asked her about her day. No one mentioned the previous night, which surprised her at first, then relieved her. Maybe people would forget about it soon. Maybe things could go back to normal. A little before noon, the owner came in, wiping his hands on a towel. He had been working in the back storage room and looked both tired and thoughtful. He walked over to the counter where Lina was arranging menus. "Morning," he said. She returned a small smile. "Good morning." He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at her in a way that made her stomach tighten. She wondered if she had done something wrong. She wondered if he was about to tell her not to touch the piano again. Finally, he let out a soft breath. "So, last night." Her fingers froze on the menu she was holding. "I'm sorry if—" He raised a hand gently. No, don't apologize." His voice was calm, but there was something warm in it too. "I didn't know you could play like that." Lena lowered her eyes. "It's been a long time." "Well, it didn't sound like a long time," he added with a small smile. "People loved it. It brought everyone together. I haven't seen the restaurant that lively in a while." She didn't know what to say. Compliments always made her uncomfortable, but this one felt even heavier. He looked toward the piano and rubbed his chin. "I've been thinking, maybe we should bring live music back on weekends. At least sometimes. The place could use a bit more life." She felt her heart thump harder. She opened her mouth to speak, then hesitated. "You mean someone else playing?" He met her eyes again. "I mean you, if you want to." Then he added quickly, "Only if you want to. I'm not trying to pressure you." Lena felt her breath catch. She didn't expect this. She had tried so hard to keep her talent tucked away, hidden beneath her quiet routine. She had walked past that piano 100 times, pretending it didn't call to her. Playing again, even for just a moment, had felt like opening a door she had kept locked for years. "I don't know," she said softly. "I'm not sure it's a good idea." "That's all right," he said gently. "Think about it. No rush. Whatever you choose is fine." He walked back toward the kitchen, leaving Lina standing by the counter with a storm of thoughts churning inside her. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to the piano, to the audience, to the feeling she had when her fingers moved over the keys dot. As the afternoon continued, the restaurant grew busier. The lunch crowd arrived: office workers, families, a group of students. The noise returned, filling the space with laughter and conversation. It was a normal day, yet Lina felt anything but normal. Halfway through the rush, a woman approached her by the drink station. She looked familiar, though Lina couldn't place her at first. "Hi," the woman said with a bright smile. "You played last night, didn't you?" Lina froze. "Oh, yes. Just a little, a little?" The woman laughed softly. "It was beautiful. I didn't get a chance to tell you." The whole room was stunned. Lina felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. I hope you play again," the woman added before returning to her table. For the rest of the day, similar comments reached her little by little. A customer who had been sitting near the stage told her the music made the rainy night feel warm. Another said they hadn't heard live piano in years. Someone else asked if she was a music student or a professional before she began working here. She shook her head every time, trying to keep her answers short, but their words lingered in her thoughts. When she finally took her short break in the late afternoon, she sat by the window with a cup of warm tea. She watched people passing on the sidewalk, watched the sunlight move across the street, watched life continuing in its usual steady rhythm. Yet the more the world seemed normal, the more she felt her own world shifting. Her memories began to rise, memories she usually avoided thinking about. Her childhood lessons, her long hours practicing, the teacher who believed in her, the dream she once had of playing on big stages. The dream that ended too soon. She shut her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breath. She didn't want to be pulled into the past. Not now. But then she remembered something else, how the piano had felt under her fingers the night before. How the keys had welcomed her back like an old friend. How she had forgotten everything else for a few minutes. Looking back toward the stage, she noticed the piano again. It wasn't shining or beautiful. It wasn't even in perfect shape. But it was there, waiting in its quiet way. Later in the evening, when the customers had thinned out and the restaurant grew calm again, Lina found herself walking past the piano once more. She stopped, almost without meaning to, and looked at it closely. Her hand reached out to touch the edge of the wooden surface. The dust from the previous day was gone. Someone had cleaned it, probably the owner. She ran her fingers over the smooth wood and felt a tug inside her chest, familiar, uncertain, but undeniable. Thinking about it, she turned and saw the cook leaning against the counter, drying his hands with a towel. He had seen her looking at the piano. She shook her head. "It's complicated." He nodded knowingly. "It usually is." They didn't talk further. He wasn't the kind of person who asked many questions, but his quiet understanding made her feel a little less alone. That night, after closing, Lina stayed behind to help clean up. She swept the floor, wiped the tables, and washed a few remaining glasses. The owner finished counting the register and turned off most of the lights. Only the soft glow near the stage remained. "You don't have to decide today," he said as he put on his coat. "Whatever makes you happy, that's what matters." She nodded. "Thank you." When everyone else had left, Lina stood alone in the dim restaurant. She looked at the piano one more time, and something inside her softened. She pulled out the bench gently and sat down. The old wood creaked beneath her, but she didn't mind. She placed her hands on her lap first, taking a slow breath, as if preparing herself for a conversation. She had avoided 2 long dots, Then she lifted her fingers and rested them lightly on the keys. The restaurant was silent. The world outside was quiet. And for a moment, Lena allowed herself to remember who she used to be. Her fingers pressed a single note, then another. Soft, simple sounds that echoed through the empty room. She didn't play a full song. She didn't need to. Just those few notes were enough to remind her that the music inside her hadn't faded. It had simply been waiting. She stood up, closed the piano gently, and walked toward the door dot as she stepped outside into the cool night air. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, Hope. The door clicked shut behind her. But the memory of the keys stayed warm in her hands. Tomorrow would come, with new choices and new questions. But for the first time in years, those possibilities didn't scare her. They felt like a beginning. The following morning felt brighter than the last, even though nothing special had happened yet. The sky outside was clear, the air fresh, and the sun rested gently on the sidewalks. But inside Lena, something was shifting, something she tried to ignore, but couldn't quite escape. It was small at first, like a soft whisper inside her chest. But the more she tried not to think about it, the louder it felt. Work started as usual. She prepared tables, polished silverware, and greeted early customers with her quiet smile. But every time she walked past the small stage, her eyes drifted toward the piano without meaning to. It sat there in the morning light, its wooden surface looking almost warm. Not perfect, not shiny, not new, but alive in its own tired way. And somehow, it felt like it was waiting for her. She forced herself to focus on her tasks. She didn't want to get distracted. She didn't want to start imagining things. Last night had already been overwhelming enough. She had played again, if only for a moment, only to remind herself that her hands still remembered. And the feeling had stayed with her, even after she locked up and walked home under the quiet sky dot. As the day went on, the usual rush settled in. People came and went, talking loudly, laughing, sipping hot drinks, and filling the restaurant with its familiar hum. Lena worked steadily through it all, but her thoughts kept drifting in circles. She wondered if she should talk to the owner. She wondered if she should say no before he asked again. She wondered if maybe this sudden attention was all just temporary, something that would fade within days. But deep down, she knew the truth. Something inside her didn't want it to fade. Around midday, the owner came in through the back door, carrying a box of supplies. He placed it on the counter with a soft thud and stretched his back with a tired sigh. "Busy morning?" he asked. "A bit," she said, adjusting the cups on the shelf. He nodded. "Good busy or stressful busy?" "Just normal," she replied. He studied her for a moment. She could feel his eyes on her, but she kept working, pretending not to notice. She wasn't ready for this conversation again. Not yet, but he didn't push. He rarely pushed anything. He simply walked off to the kitchen, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Later in the afternoon, the restaurant grew crowded again. A family celebrated a birthday at one table. A pair of friends chatted loudly over coffee at another, and a couple shared dessert near the window. The room was full of life and warmth, and Lena moved between the tables with calm precision. Then something unexpected happened. A small group of teenagers entered the restaurant, dripping water from their jackets, even though it wasn't raining. They were laughing about something, but one of them stopped suddenly when she spotted the piano. "Hey, didn't someone play that last night?" she said. One of the others nodded. "Yeah." Everyone was talking about it online this morning. Lena froze where she stood. Online? She pretended not to hear, but the group kept talking as they waited for a table. "I think someone recorded it," one said. "My cousin sent me a clip. It was really nice." "Who was the girl playing?" Another asked. No one knew. The words made her heart beat faster. She didn't know what clip they were talking about. how long it was, or what she looked like in it. The idea of her playing spreading online, even in the smallest way, terrified her and excited her at the same time. It felt strange, almost unreal, but she kept her head down and started taking their drink orders, trying to stay calm. She hoped they wouldn't recognize her. She hoped they wouldn't ask questions. "Hey," one of them said suddenly as she set down the water glasses. "Were you here last night?" Lena's breath caught. "Yes. So you must have seen the girl who played, right?" She forced a small, polite smile. "The restaurant was busy. I didn't see much." They nodded, satisfied, and went back to their conversation. She walked away quickly, relief washing over her like cold water. Her hands trembled slightly for a while after that. It was just a video clip, probably blurry, probably short. But still people had noticed. People had talked. Some small part of her felt proud, but another part felt like she wanted to hide forever. The day continued, and as evening approached, the restaurant quieted down again. The sun outside slowly dipped, and warm lights filled the room. The stage remained empty, but it no longer felt forgotten. When the owner came by her side during a calm moment, she knew he was going to bring it up again. He didn't speak right away. He just leaned against the counter and looked at the piano. "You know," he said gently, "no one expects anything from you. Not me, not the customers." "I know," she said softly. "But I want you to understand something," he continued. "Last night wasn't just music. People felt something. They connected with it. It made the room warmer, quieter, kinder." Lena stared down at her hands. "I'm not used to being seen." He nodded. "I get that, and I won't force you." He waited a second, then added quietly, "But sometimes being seen is not a bad thing." She didn't answer. She wasn't ready to. But his words stayed inside her long after he went back to the kitchen. When the restaurant finally closed for the night, Lena stayed behind again to clean. She wiped tables slowly, thinking about the voices she had heard earlier. The teens talking about the video. The customers who still remembered her playing. The owner's gentle encouragement. All of it mingled into a thought she couldn't shake. Maybe it wasn't wrong to want something. Maybe it was okay to step forward a little. She walked toward the piano, her steps light and hesitant. The room was dim, lit only by the last few overhead lights. She touched the piano's wooden surface again, her fingers lingering longer this time. Then she sat down carefully. The bench felt familiar, like it had formed a space shaped for her. She closed her eyes and let herself breathe deeply, letting the silence wrap around her. She didn't start with a full song. Instead, she played soft notes, ones that reminded her of the past, but didn't hurt anymore. And the more she played, the more her heart loosened. Notes floated through the air, small and gentle, settling into the corners of the empty room. She let her hands move however they wanted, slow and thoughtful, almost shy. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply talking to the music again after years of silence. She didn't know how long she played. Time felt blurry. When she finally stopped, the room felt different, almost lighter. As she stood, she felt something steady and clear in her chest. She wanted this. She wanted to keep playing, not for an audience, not for attention, but for herself. For the part of her that had been quiet for too long. She didn't know exactly what would happen tomorrow. But she knew one thing. She wouldn't run from this feeling anymore. She wiped her hands on her apron, grabbed her bag, and turned off the remaining lights. After locking the door behind her, she stepped into the cool night air. The street was quiet, and a gentle breeze brushed her face. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel stuck. She felt ready. Ready for whatever came next. Ready for the next moment she would sit at the piano. Ready for the small courage growing inside her. and as she walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights, she carried that feeling with her, like a warm light in her chest, steady, hopeful, and alive. The following week passed in a blur for Lena. Every day felt slightly different from the one before, as if the world had shifted just a little. Even though the restaurant looked the same, smelled the same, and ran with the same rhythm it always had. But the change wasn't in the place, it was in her. She felt it when she woke up in the mornings, when she tied her apron, when she walked through the familiar door. Something inside her had opened, even if just a crack. And that small opening made everything feel new. People still talked occasionally about the night she had played, though less loudly now. The short video clip had circled around for only a day or two before disappearing into the endless stream of online noise. But inside the restaurant, the memory lingered. Not in a loud way, just a quiet one, like the way some customers smiled at her a bit longer, or the way a few glanced at the piano as if hoping for something. Still, no one pushed her. No one asked her directly to play again. And for that, she was grateful. For several days, she avoided the piano completely. Not because she was scared, but because she didn't know what she wanted yet. She needed time. Time to untangle her feelings. Time to understand the fear and hope mixing inside her. But even as she avoided looking at it, she felt it there, silent, steady, waiting dot by the middle of the week. The owner approached her gently during a quiet afternoon. "No rush," he said with a kind smile. "Just letting you know, if you ever feel ready, the stage is always yours." She nodded, grateful he didn't press more than that. She wasn't sure when she'd be ready. She only knew she didn't want to run away anymore. On Thursday evening, the restaurant was unusually busy. A group of travelers came in, soaking wet from a sudden shower. A family sat near the window, celebrating a small accomplishment. A pair of older friends shared soup and bread while catching up about old memories. The room was filled with laughter and warm voices that blended into something comforting. Lena moved quickly from table to table, but she felt lighter than she had earlier in the week. She didn't know if it was the busy atmosphere lifting her mood or her heart slowly settling, but she felt steadier. During the rush, one of the travelers noticed the piano. He pointed at it, nudged his friend, and asked loudly, "Does anyone ever play that thing?" Lena heard the owner respond from behind the counter, "Sometimes." It wasn't a lie, but it caught her off guard. The traveler nodded. "Be great to hear some music tonight. Rainy evenings need songs." His comment wasn't directed at her, but it still made her chest tighten slightly. Music. People missed music. Later, when the dinner rush faded and customers trickled out one by one, she found herself wiping down the table closest to the stage. The piano sat there quietly, its keys hidden behind the wooden cover. The old bench looked warm but comfortable, as if it held stories from years ago. She stared at it for a moment, then looked away. Not yet, but the thought didn't scare her the way it once did. It sat inside her like a seed, something that might grow when the time was right. That night, she went home with tired feet and a mind that wouldn't settle. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of night traffic outside her window. She thought about her childhood, about the tiny music room where she used to practice for hours, about her mother listening quietly from the other room, about the small performances she used to give during school events. She remembered the first time she played in front of strangers, how her hands had shaken, how her heart had pounded, but how the music had carried her through. And she remembered the day everything stopped. She never liked thinking about that part, the loss that had hollowed something out of her, the dream she had abandoned, the piano she had walked away from. But now, when those memories came, they didn't feel as sharp. They still hurt, but the pain didn't close her off anymore. If anything, remembering only made her realize how much she had missed the feeling of playing. she finally fell asleep long after midnight, her mind drifting between past and present. The next evening, Friday, felt different as soon as she walked into the restaurant. The air felt charged with something she couldn't explain. Maybe it was because more customers than usual were coming in. Maybe it was because the weekend was approaching. Or maybe it was simply her. All day, people talked softly. The lights reflected off the glass windows. The aroma of warm bread filled the air. And the piano sat in its corner, quiet but almost inviting. Lena moved through the evening routine with practiced ease. But each time she passed the stage, her steps slowed just a little. Her eyes lingered a little longer. By the time the dinner rush was over, her heart felt full with something she couldn't hold back anymore. It wasn't pressure. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something like longing. The owner glanced at her from behind the counter. He didn't say a word, but the soft understanding in his eyes gave her courage she didn't know she needed. She cleaned the last table. She refilled the last glasses. And when the restaurant finally quieted down, when the lights dimmed slightly for the late evening mood, she found herself standing right next to the piano. Her hand hovered above the wooden cover for a long moment. She could hear her heartbeat loudly in her own ears. Her breath felt shallow. Her palms felt warm. But she didn't walk away this time. Slowly, gently, she lifted the cover. The keys looked exactly the same old, slightly yellowed, uneven in brightness. But to her, they looked beautiful. The restaurant wasn't empty yet. A few customers lingered, finishing their meals or talking quietly. She felt exposed, vulnerable, unsure, but she sat down anyway. The bench creaked softly under her weight. Her fingers rested above the keys, trembling just slightly. No one noticed at first. The conversations continued, plates clinked, and the hum of the room carried on. And then she played, a soft note, then another, a simple melody. People turned their heads, one by one. Voices quieted. Forks paused. The room shifted into stillness. Lina didn't look at anyone. She kept her eyes down, focused on the keys. Her fingers moved gently, tracing a tune she hadn't played in years, but had lived inside her all along. The music flowed slowly at first, then grew steadier as her hands loosened. She let herself melt into the sound, forgetting who watched, forgetting her fear, forgetting everything except the melody that rose from her heart. The room listened. Not with excitement or loud applause, just quiet attention, warm kind. Grateful. And for the first time in years, Lena didn't feel invisible. And she didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt alive. When the song ended, the silence in the room held for a second longer than usual, like everyone wanted to keep the moment just a little longer. Then soft applause filled the air, not overwhelming, but gentle and heartfelt. Lena looked up briefly, her eyes meeting several warm smiles. She felt her cheeks burn, but she also felt something new settle inside her, something steady, something real. She closed the piano carefully and stepped away. But the owner walked over and whispered, "Thank you." She didn't know what to say. She only nodded. The rest of the night felt like a dream. Customers left with peaceful smiles. The lights dimmed further. The kitchen quieted. When she finally walked home, the cool night breeze touched her face. The street was calm, and the world felt wider somehow. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she would play every weekend, or only sometimes. She didn't know if any of this would change her life in a big way. But she knew one thing. She had chosen to step forward. She had chosen to open the door she had closed so long ago. And that simple choice, quiet, gentle, brave in its own way, was enough to change everything inside her. As she walked under the dim streetlights, her hands still warm from the keys, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt free.